Welcome in, everyone, to the Bend Real Estate Podcast. I am your host, Rob Eggers, principal broker here at Duke Warner Realty. Over 20 years experience selling real estate here in Bend. And I am joined by my business partner, Katrina Swisher, also over 20 years experience selling real estate here in Bend. And Katrina, we are talking about a super fun conversation today. We are going to dive into the lawsuit with the National Association of Realtors. So this has been a very hot topic, obviously in the real estate world around our office. We had kind of an office meeting about it last week. So what we're going to do today is we're going to talk about several things. We're going to first kind of explain what happened in this lawsuit briefly, kind of the implications. Then we're going to talk about how this affects sellers. We're going to talk about how this affects buyers. We're going to talk about how this affects us as agents. And we're also going to talk about just some misconceptions that are out there. But Katrina, when this thing first happened, kind of last fall, what was your just initial reaction, when you first heard about it? Because initially it was a $1.8 billion lawsuit.
I really didn't think it was ever going to happen or that it would affect us.
Yeah.
We were hearing, I didn't think it would really play out. We were hearing that it was just going to get overturned and this would go away.
Yeah. Yeah, that was kind of the word that we had heard. And I mean, it just seems so outlandish. $1.8 billion. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's a dollar amount that we can't really even fathom.
Right.
So then just recently to hear that the NAR, the National Association of Realtors, proposed a settlement agreement for $418 million was kind of shocking.
Yeah, it blindsided us, really.
Because it kind of legitimized this lawsuit, made it seem like, oh my gosh, this thing is not going away. This is actually happening. And for them to settle meant like, okay, this is just, it's going to happen. Mm-hmm. So that was pretty shocking. But what's interesting is it's a settlement. It's a proposed settlement. This is not inked yet. The Department of Justice still has to approve it. There's several steps that need to take place, but it sounds like because of this step that something along these lines is going to actually happen.
Yeah.
It's not just going to go away like we initially thought. So here's what happened. So part of the settlement agreement stipulates that MLS listings cannot show cooperative broker compensation amounts. The other thing that it stipulates is that buyers that are working with brokers must sign a buyer-broker agreement detailing how they're going to be compensated. Those are probably the two big things that came out of this. There's probably a lot of other things I don't know. And by the way, we're certainly not attorneys. We're not experts on this. I don't know if there is an expert on this, except for maybe the people that were in the courts. It's a very complex issue. We're just trying to give you the highlights of it.
Right. There's still so many unknowns of how this is going to affect us and play out.
Yep.
But like you said, the two main items, the rules are the MLS commissions not being able to post those and having the buyer broker agreement.
So that's on MLS, and that's an important distinction because they left it open that you can show agent commissions on private websites, company websites, marketing materials, etc. It just can't be in MLS, which is for us unfortunate because we go to MLS for everything. It's our one-stop shop to get all the information. We pull up listings, all the listing information is right there, including what the amount is that we would get paid. So that's kind of the overview of what's happened, and there's going to be, unfortunately, a massive amount of change and shakeout due to that. There's just implications that run very deep with this. So I think we'll get into how this affects sellers. So obviously sellers feel like this is a win for them because, commissions are now only going to be 3%. They went from 6 to 3. So sellers are probably like, this is awesome. I'm going to, if I'm going to sell my home in March, maybe I'll wait till July. July 1, by the way, is when this proposed settlement agreement is supposed to be finalized or approved by the Department of Justice.
At the earliest.
At the earliest. I don't think that'll happen. I think that's really quick. We'll see. We didn't think this was going to get this far.
Right.
So we'll see. But anyway, I think sellers feel like this is probably a win for them. However, I disagree. I don't see, actually, to be honest, I don't see a winner anywhere. I don't see a winner for sellers. I don't see a winner for buyers. I certainly don't see a winner for agents. I don't really see a winner for anybody except the lawyers that were involved in this. They're the ones that are actually making all the money, because I think by the time the money trickles down to the consumer that was involved in these class action suits, they're going to get pennies on the dollar,
right,
compared to what the legal teams are going to receive. So I think it's misleading that they will save 3% and get the same selling result. So a seller might think, okay, I'm going to list my house. I'm going to do it for 3%. That's great. What do you think the result's going to be for them?
Who's going to sell your home
if
you're not paying a buyer's broker? And that's this whole thing. It's so misleading. There's so many pieces of it that are misunderstood in how commissions are paid, how they've always been negotiable, how when we sign a listing, what that entire commission is for, and how it's broken down to the buyer's agent and to our side of the deal. I don't think a lot of people truly understand that to begin with. And then you go and change this and have the misconception that a seller can do it for half and not pay the buyer's broker.
Yeah.
So again, who's going to sell your home? We have always cooperated with other agents because that is the best way to sell your home. The highest probability for success is us cooperating with the MLS and every agent who is out there to show your home to their buyer and to pay them a fee for that service so that their buyer has representation and the seller is equally represented.
That's why the MLS was created.
Right.
Among other reasons. But yeah, to make the most favorable environment for home selling, really. The MLS, it was a huge contributor to that. So I think there's, it's very misleading for, these sellers that, I just get to sell my house for 3% now.
Right. When
agents are going to be like, wait a minute, they're not paying anything? Well, I can't work with that. I mean, we're out here to make money. This is our job. Yes, we love helping people, and that's part of, I think, that's one of the maybe core things that realtors like about their job. They are helping people. One of the reasons I got into it was I love the idea of selling the American dream, home ownership. But at the same time, it doesn't mean I want to do it for free. That's just not realistic.
Right.
What industry has people do that?
And to think that the buyer, how is the buyer supposed to buy a home without having their own representation? They don't just call on the sign and then we as the listing agent can't help them for free. We can't properly represent them legally.
Right, because we have all the liability of both sides.
All the liability. So you're wearing two hats to represent both parties, and that comes at a cost.
Yeah.
But they're trying, I guess the misunderstanding is they're trying to put that out there as that cost is going away. And in fact, it's not. It has to be absorbed by somebody. So who's going to pay that buyer representation?
Right. Yeah, that's why I think it's misleading, because I think a lot of the sellers are going to end up paying the 3% anyway. They're gonna be out there having to pay somebody to, on the other side, and we'll get into this, but it's not going to come from the buyer.
Right.
The buyer just doesn't have, the resources to do that 99% of the time. So I think it's very misleading for sellers. It's also, I think that could affect sellers that home prices may come down a bit to reflect that 3%. So the seller right now is thinking, oh, I get to save 3% and sell my house for, say it's worth $700,000. My home's worth $700,000 and I get to save 3%. I don't think you get to have both.
Right. And, the thing is, another misleading part of all of this is that commissions have dictated home values.
Right.
And that we're driving the cost of home prices up based on commissions.
Yes.
And that is completely false. We have no part in what homes are worth and if the values are going up or down. Commissions have always been a part of that. The value is determined simply by supply and demand.
Yeah.
Not about if you're paying commission or not.
It has nothing to do with that.
You could sell your home for sale by owner and it's still worth the same as the home next door paying commission.
Yeah. I cringe so deeply when I hear that argument that agents control the market,
Right.
Agents control pricing. So we had this little thing back in 2008 called the Great Housing Crisis. If agents
remember.
Really remember that little thing,
that little blip
that devastated the entire country. If agents were really controlling
Right.
housing pricing, you think we would all let it tank the way we did? And probably most agents who are also very heavily usually invested in real estate
Right.
lost tons of real estate during that. So it's ridiculous to think that agents just control pricing.
And it absolutely does us no favors to try and increase a home price, to try and raise that value for our own benefit or the market's benefit. That's going to backfire because, again, it's supply and demand. And if the demand is not there, it's not going to sell for that. A home simply sells based on the demand for that property.
Right. So think if I said, I'm thinking in my mind, okay, this home is worth $700,000, but you know what? I need to tell them it's worth $750,000 so I can make a little bit more commission
and start to raise the values of property in town.
You think that's actually going to sell because of that? No.
Right.
The market's going to be like, you know what? This property is overpriced by $50,000 and it will sit.
Right.
So even if agents tried to do that, it wouldn't be successful because the market dictates pricing, not us.
And as a good agent, we will determine what the best price is for your home, and that may be lower than a home seller even expects it to be. Based on their perception of the market and what we know from our expertise, the home is actually not worth that. And as a good agent, you go in with the lower value if that's really where it's at. You don't just go in with a high number.
Right. Yeah, so I think there's a lot of areas where it could affect the seller negatively, and they think it's a win for them, but I don't really think it is. I think there's a lot of ways they lose. I think there's also going to be agents that could potentially misrepresent the situation and go to a seller, hey, guess what? You get to sell your house for 3% now. And they're like, awesome. And they get the listing. That's what they have. And then the seller's like, why are we having difficulty with showings? And so the agent's like, well, you're not offering to pay buyers, brokers. It's like, well, I didn't really think about that. We didn't talk about that. It's like, well, too late. You signed the listing with this person. So there's going to be a lot of misconception, a lot of misleading. And then in the end, that seller is going to probably be like, well, I guess in order to get my home sold, let's say they've been on the market for a month and they get an offer and the agent brings the buyer and the agent says, hey, here's also a contract to pay me. Will you pay this?
Exactly.
The seller's going to be like, this is the best thing I've got. I should probably do this.
Right.
And that's business as usual. That's how we've done it for decades now.
Right. Because it's like all of a sudden you think as a seller, you're going to list your home for $600,000 because the comps in the neighborhood show it's worth $600,000. Your neighbor's home, same house, sold for that a month ago, but they paid full commission. Suddenly you think your home is worth the same, but that buyer's perception is going to be, well, you're not paying a full commission, so I should be able to get it for less, just as they do in a for sale by owner situation.
Discount it, yeah.
Is that it should be discounted because you take that commission out of it, or contribute that commission, take it off of the sales price. But like you said, if that agent, there's no payment to the buyer's agent, they're going to negotiate that into the deal.
Mm-hmm.
And that's essentially what all of this says. I mean, it says it in the lawsuit. Well, then you can go get the payment for the buyer's agent this way or this way or this way.
Mm-hmm. Which is really how we do it today.
Right.
But it's already kind of built in automatically. We don't have to go through all of these hoops, really. It's set up that way.
It's set up that way.
When you take the listing, for those of you that don't know, say it's a 6% listing, that 6% is divided by 2. The listing agent party, or the firm, really say that the listing agent is with, gets 3%, and then the buyer's agent firm gets 3%. Once that 3% is sent to the different firms, if they are in different firms, then it's split between broker and the agent.
Right.
And then you have to pay expenses and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
So really the fee to sell a house, yes, I will stand firm that 6% is a ton of money when it comes to selling real estate, but it's also the cost to sell your house. It doesn't just go to one agent. It goes to the brokerage. It goes to the agent. It goes to all the expenses, the marketing, the advertising, the MLS fees, all the things that we have to deal with just to get a home sold. So it feeds a lot of mouths.
If it is broken down substantially from what the public thinks.
Yes.
We do not take home 3%.
Not even close.
Not even close.
Actually, less than 50% of 3%
exactly.
in most cases.
Most cases, because, once, like you said, our office takes their fees, it's always split. Mm-hmm. That 6%, we never sign a listing, and that's not have a portion, typically 50%, going to the buyer's broker. But yeah, our costs continue to go up year after year after year. Yet commissions are negotiated down more often than not.
Yeah.
I think that 6%, as I think one of the other misconceptions of the lawsuit, is that was a set number. Mm-hmm. And I think it's a standardized number that as realtors we've all gone off of, so that it's not driven up. And just you have agents out there demanding more and more and more. Mm-hmm. But it's always been negotiable, and oftentimes it's less than that.
Yeah, it's oftentimes less than that. It's oftentimes negotiable. And if an agent wanted to try to control that and say, you know what, I want 8%, let's do that. Well, they probably wouldn't get very many listings because there's other agents that are out there that are going to do it for 6 or maybe 5.
We have to be competitive.
So we have to be competitive too. So the market kind of controls our commission amount.
Absolutely. Our fellow brokers, how standard it is in our community and across the country in general, what sellers are used to paying, what they know it is, and typically they do have a starting point in their mind that it can be 6% and negotiated from there. And of course, there's always budget realtors. There's always going to be the realtor out there who's going to take the listing for less. But we've always said you get what you pay for.
Yep.
And just as we were talking about earlier, you can hire a builder and suddenly the budget comes in and you can't afford that. The builder doesn't change his costs. You just make cuts of what you want in your home. So we can cut services, but that's not what we do. We give the best service we can possibly give to our clients, and that does come at a fee.
All right, so now let's switch over and talk a little bit about buyers, how this affects buyers. It's a massive, massive impact on buyers. So now buyers are going to be forced to be on the hook to pay agents if the seller's not going to. In order to work with an agent, you have to sign a buyer-broker agreement that stipulates compensation will come from the buyer. So just in order to work with an agent, we are by law have to have it signed. So that's a huge thing. And then, of course, 99% of buyers can't afford this. I mean, we were just talking a minute ago about interest rates. We're at a really high interest rate situation. It was 8% last fall, dropped down into the sevens. Now we've been fluctuating near 7. But, we've had how many years now? Almost 15 or whatever, with rates in the 4s and 3s. So this is a big stretch for buyers right now. Buyers are very strained.
Very strained and very insecure about getting in the market because of interest rates.
Yep.
Most of the impact we've seen on our market and things slowing down, it's completely based on buyers holding off because they just simply can't afford to buy a home at these interest rates, or they're kind of waiting to see, if that will go down and what's happening in the market. Then you throw this curveball at them.
Yeah.
They sit down and meet with us, hire us, and want to start looking at homes, and we throw this agreement at them that now they're on the hook to pay our commission.
Yeah.
I mean, talk about fear factor setting in.
Right.
It's completely just going to throw them off and make them not want to do it.
Well, it could be the make or break, because so many people are already not able to qualify with rates what they are. If you look at home prices and then the percentage they have to put down, you have to put down, say, 5%, 10%, 20% in some cases. With home prices, what it is, those dollar amounts are enormous. And buyers are really scratching and clawing to make their down payments.
Right.
Let alone on top of that, now they're going to have to pay commission.
And it's never been something they've had to worry about. We can meet with a buyer and say, my service to you is covered as part of the sale from the seller.
It's a huge benefit for the buyer, the way it used to be. And now the burden falls on them. And there's already a lot of discontentment from the buyers because pricing is so high.
Right.
Affordability is such an issue, nationally. People can't afford homes. This is like one more major rock thrown at their face. Like, now you have to do this on top of everything else. It's like they're almost making home ownership like unobtainable.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's a huge burden for buyers, and just makes for, an awkward situation, because now what they're going to be looking at is, I can't afford to pay my agent, so now I maybe need to figure out other options. And those other options are going to include very little, if no, representation.
Right.
So there might be an agent out there who's like, oh yeah, I'll do the paperwork for you for $1,000. Well, they're not going to get any help.
Right. They're not going to be properly represented in every way that they should be. And not only that, but just the above and beyond service that we offer to our clients, walking them through just the emotional aspect. There's so much to worry about. And of course, there's the legal aspect and all we do there, but just being there as their support, being there that they know they have us to ask any question. They have us to fall back on for anything at any time. We work 24/7 essentially, and we're there for them.
Oh yeah.
So now they just are going blindly into buying a home without anyone to really be on their side, to have their back.
I mean, it starts on day one. What do you think of this neighborhood? What do you think of the value of this home? And it just goes from there. It's endless. The stuff that we bring to the table to help our buyers out. And that's even before they've even walked through the door of a house. And, if you talk about them, all of a sudden they're on their own, no representation because they have to pay it.
Right. They can't sign this agreement that we now are legally bound to have them sign.
Like, we cannot work with them unless this is signed. We have to say sorry.
And they can't sign it.
They can't sign it.
I can't do that.
Right. So many of them are going to be forced into no representation or getting into deals where they think they might be represented, but they're really not because
Right.
they're paying a massive discount, or the agents may be representing the seller and just doing theirs for a fee or something like that. So it's, I think buyers are one of the biggest losers in this whole scenario. It's really sad, and it's already hard for buyers, like we've mentioned.
Right. They're trying to make it appear favorable to the seller. But even at that, at the end of the day, this is not favorable to the seller either.
Yeah.
It just muddies the waters and makes this more complicated and confusing for all parties.
Absolutely. So this will be an interesting one too, because this really affects us, but we're going to discuss for a minute how it affects agents. So for me, the biggest thing that it does out of the box is it forces us from being service focused to money focused. And I'll explain what I mean by that. Like, let's say I've got a buyer and we're going to look at 10 homes and they're all in the MLS. Today, for the last 10 years, 20 years, I don't even think about commission. I really don't. I just know I've got a buyer. Here's what their needs are. Here's 10 homes that are a possibility for them. Let me find the home that best suits them, because really, any home that they choose, I'm going to get paid on. It's in the MLS. I know there's compensation there. It might fluctuate a little bit, but it's there for me, right? So it gives me the freedom to just go any direction the buyer wants to go, because any direction the buyer wants to go, I follow, and I'm going to get paid at the end of that. Now, you take that away. So let's say I show 10 homes and there's 4 that offer compensation, but the rest don't. Then it puts me in a situation like I'm all of a sudden focused on money. Like service has taken a back seat. And I'm going, oh my gosh, am I not going to get paid if they happen to like this house over here? What am I going to do? How am I going to handle that? Is the buyer going to be able to pay me? Am I going to have to try to get something out of the seller?
Right.
It changes the focus completely from service to money. And I hate that. That's a loss for the buyers then too,
Right.
because we've lost our focus on serving them. And I mean, we're still going to do that. That's ingrained, but it's going to be hard when we know that we're going into a situation where, okay, I'm showing a house, but there's no compensation for me.
Right. And you and I have built our business based on our service, our level of service. And that's why our business is referral based, and people continue to come back to us because we go above and beyond in our service level. That is who we are as people. But now we have to think if we're getting paid or not. I mean, like you said, that was never the focus before, but nobody works for free. And we put in countless hours, phone calls and emails and text messages at 10 p.m., Sunday, on Easter, whatever it is.
I've been asked to show homes on Christmas Eve.
Absolutely. That is our job. And we jump to be the best we can be for our clients. And that is proven in our track record and our reputation. But we know at the end of the day, we're getting paid. And sometimes that can be 6 months of work. It can be years. We've had clients for years.
Yep.
And eventually, it will happen and you'll get that paycheck. And, we do have to survive and get paid for what we do somehow.
Otherwise, we wouldn't be here.
And now that does pose a big question mark of how much time can I put into this if I don't know if I'm ever going to get paid from it.
I'm already thinking about buyers that I've been working with for over a year. We've made offers on several homes. None of them have worked out for various reasons. But now I'm in a situation, it's like, I never was really thinking about the time before, but now I'm thinking like, oh my gosh, if they don't buy something by July 1 and this actually happens, am I going to have worked for over a year and a half and not get paid?
Right.
That's huge.
And do people realize that we don't get paid any other way?
Yeah.
We're not on a salary.
Commission.
We're 100% commission. We spend not only our time, which is valuable, but our gas, so many other expenses that go into that out of our pocket ahead of time. And we hope at the end of it, we get something.
Right. It's a really interesting kind of business model the way it's set up because we assume 100% of the risk.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like we've been paid up front.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, here's, $10,000. Go find me a house. And maybe it takes a year, maybe it takes 5 days. I don't know. But instead, it's let's start this house shopping journey. And if it takes 10 days or a year, then you get paid.
Mm-hmm.
So we have all the risk of things happening, things changing. How many buyers have you had over the years that decided after 6 months, like, I guess I'm not going to buy right now?
You're
Countless.
essentially working for free. You're putting yourself out there for quite a long time until they come forward. Again, serving them, doing the best we can to be of service and hoping that it comes to fruition. And many times it doesn't. And that's a loss.
Mm-hmm.
That's a loss to what we thought our income would be for that year. And I just don't think the public understands that there's no other profession that works for free ahead of time. You have to sign, you pay your doctor at the desk before you go in. You have to sign a retainer for a builder, for a lawyer, for any service you pay up front. And we've never asked for that. And now they're just kind of taking it away completely, or at least making it challenging where we have to fight for it.
Right. Well, the other way it really affects agents is it's going to make it really confusing on which homes we get paid for and which we don't. Because right now, if it's in the MLS, I know I'm getting paid. But now it's going to be, all the homes will still be in the MLS, but we won't have any idea if we're getting paid on those or not. So I don't even know how that's going to look. We'll probably have to call every time somebody wants to see a house. We'll have to call the agent. Hey, is the seller offering something? Or go to a separate website other than the MLS. Is this listed on a website out there that says, hey, they're offering commission to a buyer's broker? So it's a whole extra step of kind of like digging and researching of whether or not we're going to get paid on every individual home that we happen to come across.
Right.
That's a lot of extra time and effort and work.
Yeah, and it takes away the focus, like you said, of it being about the home and the right home for the buyer. And hopefully we are able to negotiate that with the buyer, but what if we can't? And what if we're in this process with the seller and this is the home they want, and just as we're trying to negotiate other terms, we're trying to get closing costs for the buyer, we're trying to get the right price for the buyer, and sometimes it doesn't work out. Now you're adding a third thing that needs to be negotiated into the deal, which could result in the loss of this home for that buyer, which is just really unfortunate when there's not a lot of choices for the buyers anyways. I think it also throws kind of this wrench in things between us and cooperating brokers. It's huge in our business that we have that camaraderie with our fellow agents outside of our office.
Yes.
We work 99% of the time with other brokers outside of our office, and we built relationships with them, which are strong and valuable to the whole transaction that benefit both the seller and the buyer for a smooth transaction. And now you've thrown in a piece that muddies the waters.
Right.
And that's why it has always been an MLS. It takes it off the table. It's right there.
Yeah.
Done.
It's a foregone
It's over
conclusion.
here.
Yeah.
Now the main purpose is let's negotiate the sale of this home. And now you're throwing that into it, and I think it just is going to distract from the entire deal and make things sticky between us and other cooperating brokers.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, how many times have we won, say, getting the offer that was chosen? A lot of the times because the other agent on the other end is like, oh my gosh, I'm so glad you wrote this. I would love to work with you again. We've had that so many times.
Right.
But now you talk about muddying the waters with some of these agents, and the focus becomes, diverted into this other topic. It's really sad.
It is sad.
Because that's really why we do this. We're trying to help people get home ownership. And yes, it's our job, and that's part of it. But now it just the focus is just a lot different.
It's never been about our commission. That's over here. We deal with it.
Yeah.
It's not put in front of.
Yeah, that's just something that we deal with on the side, but it's never at the forefront of when we're working with people. That's like the back end. Now it's the front end.
Right. It's the front end, and there's always been a cost to sell your home. And what is the standard cost to sell your home? And we work on that with our seller. And it just is what it is. And now it's just completely, it's the other misrepresentation and misleading fact in the whole lawsuit is like we were doing something wrong before. Mm-hmm. And there was nothing that was wrong. It's just now it's getting shifted into different ways of doing it, which is completely just confusing to everybody.
It is. It's very confusing. It's very unsettling. It's going to change how we've done business, and I wish it was a change for the better, but I feel like this is a milestone event. This is like a 2008 housing crisis. This is like a COVID crisis. This is like a third in our 20 plus year career. This is like a third big milestone event,
right?
That will probably shake up and change real estate, how it's been done, which is pretty enormous.
It is, and we will be greatly affected. But at the end of the day, this isn't about us, really. I mean, the buyers and sellers are going to be the most impacted in how this plays out. Mm-hmm. We will, because it's our income, but it's going to just make the whole real estate process, I think, much uglier than it is now by letting us do our jobs to the best of our ability. And now we're not able to do that as well.
Yeah, for sure. So you mentioned one thing, and the last topic here was misconceptions. And I think a misconception is that, there's this lawsuit. Now NAR is settling. Agents must have been doing something to deserve this.
Right.
They've been stealing or something. They're criminals or something. They got sued because they're doing illegal activity. That's couldn't be further from the case.
Or they're gouging us. They're getting paid way too much. It's about time they get paid less.
Yeah.
All those things.
There's all those things. So some of those misconceptions, like we're controlling pricing. We talked about that. We don't control pricing at all. The market dictates pricing. Yes, there's commission involved, but we're talking about people that need to get paid. Nobody likes the whole commission thing, but how else do you do it?
Right.
It's not like we're all going to be like, I'm just going to do this for free for the rest of my life. I mean, that's just not realistic.
Exactly. And you don't question what your attorney charges. If you want the best representation, you're going to pay for it.
Right.
You can pay for the lower representation and you're going to get what you pay for, and you're going to lose in court.
Yep.
And is that what you want when you're buying a house?
Yeah.
So we've never done anything wrong. We've never, been price gouging. It's been kind of a standard cost. And I think the statistic for the average income of a realtor nationwide is less than $50,000.
It's true. It's less than $50,000. When I looked several years ago, it was 34.
Right.
I haven't looked recently, but I'm sure it's probably in that 40 to 50 range.
So the idea that real estate agents are just raking it in. When you break down our hourly cost, our hourly wage, if we did it that way, it's
do that.
a fraction of what an attorney costs. It's a fraction of your doctor's bills. I'm not comparing myself to a doctor, and not even an attorney. However, we're dealing with legal paperwork that we are liable for, that we are on the hook for, that we could go to court for and be sued for. That's not something to be taken lightly or just take off the table as far as being represented for.
Right. And also you're talking about people that are making probably the biggest, one of the most important purchase decisions of their entire life. I mean, do you really want to just go to Acme Realtor to do something like that? Yeah. I mean, that's discounting all the way. I mean,
half the service for half the cost.
It's like if you have a brain tumor, do you really want to go to the most discounted surgeon in the United States, or do you want to go to the person who's the best? That's kind of the comparison, really, because it's such an important decision.
It is. And these days, everyone is sue happy. There's so much liability. We take that off of the buyer and the seller by handling it for them.
All right, Katrina. So in conclusion, we've talked about just the terms that were laid down. We've talked about how this affects buyers. We've talked about how this affects sellers. We've talked about how this affects realtors. But I think our ending message really needs to be really kind of what to do next when this shakes out. And I think it's important for sellers not to get caught up in this misconception or misleading idea that from now on, I get to sell my home for 2.5% or 3%, and that's it. Because we've explained how that will not work. And it just is the buyers won't have representation. Who's going to want to sell your house? All of those things. So what I think sellers need to realize is like, okay, it's kind of business as usual, but just how we structure it might be a little bit different. Would you agree?
Exactly. And even yesterday when we went to our principal broker to discuss our concerns and those types of things, he said the same thing. Like, it's not going to be as big of an impact as we feel like it's going to be. That we will get used to this because ultimately it is just a different way of structuring it and handling it. And we just have to get through this bumpy part first.
Right. So sellers need to realize, okay, there's multiple parties involved here. There's a seller, there's a buyer, there's a seller's agent, there's a buyer's agent. Everybody needs to be paid, so to speak, in this situation. So if they just kind of continue with that mindset of like really how it's done today, things will be taken care of because we'll figure out on the back end, like if it's not an MLS, we'll figure out how we're going to do the payment, how it'll be structured. There's probably going to be new paperwork involved. Like you have to sign forms that maybe the seller agrees to. But as long as sellers have that, keep that same mindset of like, yes, okay, things are going to pretty much operate this way they have always operated, then we'll be okay.
The cost to sell hasn't gone down.
Right.
It's still there.
It's still there.
It's just how it's formatted.
How it's formatted, exactly. Yeah. So I think that's a good message to end on. And what about for buyers? What message should we leave for buyers?
Well, I think it's very scary for buyers to hear this and to hear that they may have to pay that commission. Ultimately, our goal will to be negotiate that they aren't paying it. Because like you said, they can't afford to. So it's going to eliminate those buyers from the market.
Yeah.
And it's going to take the success rate down tremendously for a seller. So ultimately, we still are here to serve them and to negotiate that the best way we possibly can into the deal that they can buy the house they want and the seller's still paying for that representation for the buyer.
Yeah. Yeah. So I know that, like you said it perfectly, this puts a huge stress and strain on buyers because they're like going, this has made it impossible for us. But I believe that when sellers come to terms with this, that this is not going to really change how we've done business forever. It's just maybe a different structure,
right?
But to the same end result, then they'll realize, okay, the buyers are going to realize, okay, then maybe this will be taken care of and I could still be represented and buy this house.
Yeah. And unfortunately, we'll have to still have them sign that agreement, which, we should be doing anyways, because we should have a contract with the buyer just as we do the seller to protect ourselves and what we're offering to them, and that there is compensation for what we're offering to them.
And the time investment that we put in.
So we still need to do that piece of it, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they are the ones having to pay it at the end of the deal.
Yeah. Well, I think it's going to be a very interesting year.
Yes. It's always fun.
I know. Very interesting year. And that is actually kind of, this might sound weird, but when you do something for as long as we have, it does keep things interesting when you keep having these curveballs thrown at you, because it's not like just, doing the exact same thing day in, day out for, 30 years in a row. It's like things change all the time. So it does kind of keep it fresh and exciting, but it will be an interesting year with this thing.
It will. It will be interesting because there's a lot of moving parts and a lot of people involved to get on the same page with how this is going to work.
I'm really looking forward to New Year's Day of 2025 because I feel like a lot of this stuff will be kind of shaken out.
It usually does. We're presented every year with like you said, a lot of changes,
Yeah.
a lot of things that come at us. This is significant. It's much bigger than we've had to face for a really long time.
Mm-hmm.
But, what we're faced with each year as far as liability and disclosures and things that come at us that can be overwhelming, that we're taking on.
Mm-hmm.
We get used to it.
Yeah.
We do our job.
Mm-hmm.
We're experts in this. We're educated in what we do to be the best service to our clients.
Mm-hmm.
So we will get through this as well.
Yeah, and I feel like there is going to be some attrition. The agent that does one transaction a year, which is a lot of agents, or maybe less than 3 or 4 transactions a year, those people might just bow
80%
out.
80% of the agents.
Yeah, those people might bow out. But that's not necessarily a bad thing. I think the general public should have professionals that are in this industry that are working full time, that really are in the full knowledge of the market in order to be best representing people.
Mm-hmm.
That's really who should be out there anyway, in my opinion. So
exactly.
maybe there could be some good things that come of this, some streamlining, and the top agents rise even higher. So, which is good for us in that sense. So, all right. Well, thank you guys so much for the discussion. We will keep you posted as things come out with this. We're gonna learn about it, and we'll see how things play out. So my guess is that this is not the last podcast discussion we have about this. So stay tuned for more. So anyway, thank you guys so much for being with us today. If you're watching us on YouTube, please give it a like, subscribe. We would love that. Make a comment. Let us know what you think. Let us know how you're maybe affected by this. Or if you're listening to it on a podcast, share it with a friend. Send it to someone who's selling their house or thinking of selling, and send us a note. We'd love to hear from you as well. So anyway, guys, thanks for being here. Have a great day, and we will talk to you soon. Take care.